how's everybody? I thought I'd do one story in this podcast. I've got a new microphone for my little podcast machine that I'm going to be bringing to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference. Just wanted to test it out. I'm going to do one podcast with this thing, see how it sounds. I think it's probably going to work okay. Remember, if you come, if you'd like to share your encounter and you're not one of the people who is sharing it, okay, y'all, I've got the door open. It's early in the morning. I've got animals just raising sand everywhere. So you have to deal with the animal sounds. If you come to the conference and you want to share an encounter, I'm going to have just a little table set up with these microphones, and you can sit down and tell your encounter face to face to me, and we'll get it in a podcast, just in your voice. I've been dying to do that, and so that's what this is. None of it makes any difference. I'm just rambling on. Let's get to the story. The writer's name is Steve. It's a Bigfoot encounter. Here's what he writes. I'm from a small town in Wayne County, West Virginia. It's located in the middle of nowhere, but for reference, East Lynn Lake is to the west, and Cabolingo State Forest is to the south. The landscape is made up of a series of heavily wooded hollers and ridges, with the occasional hilltop field and creek bottoms being the only flat spots in the whole area. Most of the roads follow the creeks and ridges. The first time I ever heard of Bigfoot as being real happened when I was 13 or 14 years old. Two of my cousins, Jason and Junior, told me their story. They were following a slowpoke old couple on Route 37 through East Lynn Lake State Park near the Lick Creek boat ramp. They said the older couple suddenly slammed on their brakes to avoid a giant Sasquatch crossing the road in front of them. There was a wide spot just beyond the boat ramp and playground where the old couple pulled over, and my cousins pulled in right behind them. The four watched as the massive beast ran down the steep hill towards the lake. It was winter, so with the lake at Winter Pool, it was about 20 feet wide where the creature jumped across. It ran up the hill on the other side at an unbelievable pace, disappearing into the brush about halfway up the opposite hill. I knew they were stoned when they were telling me the story, so I thought they were probably making it up to get a laugh. Now that I've seen and heard these things, I know they were telling the truth. About a year after hearing my cousin's tale, I had my first encounter. I was on the UKC competition raccoon hunt. My dad and I both had dogs entered in the hunt, and we were cast out separately. I was too young to drive, so I had to ride with one of the fellows I'd been cast out to hunt against. It was a great hunt for my group, with me and my beloved blue-tick coon hound way in the lead. Old Blue was the best dog I'd ever hunted with, and I loved that dog as much as a 15-year-old hillbilly could love one. We had about 30 minutes of allotted time left for the hunt, but had run out of normal hunting spots. One of the hunters knew a spot close by. However, it required driving down a rough road to get there. It was about a half mile away and then straight up a rocky West Virginia mountain all the way to the top. I don't know why this sounded like a good idea, but we all agreed, and off we went. We drove the two beat-up trucks up the creek bed and then slowly began ascending up a steep, rocky, unkept road. It was more like a four-wheeler trail than a road. We reached the top and turned the dogs loose down the other side of the hill. After just a few minutes, everyone's dogs came back except mine, and I called for Blue over and over, but to no avail. The other hunters were ready to go, but still Blue had not showed up. I told them to go ahead without me and send my dad back up here to get me. They acted like they didn't want to leave me, but I insisted. And I assured them I'd been hunting in the dark woods since I was a toddler and that I would be okay. I wasn't afraid of the woods or the dark. After much debate, they all left. I stood there alone in the dark. I didn't turn on my light so that my eyes would adjust to the darkness. Not long after the taillights disappeared into the darkness, I heard movement coming through the brush towards me. I quickly turned on my light and shined it on my best friend running towards me. I saw eye shine behind him. Blue rushed into my arms with an urgency that told me something was wrong. I snapped the lead onto his collar and then turned the light back on in the direction from which he had come. About 50 feet or so away from us stood a large man with wide-set eyes that glowed when the light hit them. Except this was no man. He was way too big. His brownish-red 3-inch long hair moved in the breeze as my heart sank into my stomach. In a soft tone, I said, "Hello," but there was no reply. And then I said, "I've got a gun, so don't come any closer." I was bluffing. I didn't have a gun, and Blue positioned himself between me and the enormous thing that was now moving towards us, its hand up to block the light from its eyes. "Stop right there," I said a little louder. "I'll shoot you if you come any closer." I started backing down the road, pulling my dog with me. I was never more frightened in my life. I felt the warm stream of urine run down my leg as I continued to back away from the beast. I'm going to die right here, right now, I thought, and I knew I was helpless to prevent it. I started praying out loud, "Lord God, please just let me out of here and I'll never sin again." I was bargaining. "I'll obey your commandments. Please just don't let this thing kill me." The creature turned and I saw another one behind it. It was a smaller, darker one, possibly black. I could almost make out breasts, so I assumed it was a female. They chattered between themselves while I kept slowly backing away, never taking my light off of them. And in a flash, one went right and the other went left, and I lost sight of both of them. I shined the light around in every direction, but I couldn't see anything. I couldn't hear anything either. I turned off my light and tried to let my eyes adjust to the darkness, and after a few minutes I started walking down the road towards the creek. I heard the movement on both sides as I walked. I would stop and turn my light in the direction I heard the sound, but I couldn't see anything, and when I stopped to listen, the sound stopped. I turned the light back on the rocky road and kept walking towards the creek. I decided at that moment that there would be nothing I could do if they wanted to kill me, so I just walked as normally as I could down the uneven road. Blue, who normally walked in front of me, was behind me, then on my right and then on my left for a few seconds and then behind me again. He didn't growl, he acted as scared as I was. Somehow I managed to make it to the creek, but I couldn't take it anymore. The tears poured from my eyes like a faucet, and I cried out, "Thank you, God," in a loud and confident voice. I wasn't out of the woods yet, but I felt like these creatures knew God, like they wouldn't touch me only because of God. And I splashed down the creek fearlessly, knowing they wouldn't touch me. I pulled Blue, who was still scared to death and walking with his tail between his legs, all the way to the main road. And then I stood there soaking wet from the urine and the creek water, and I cried while I waited for my father to arrive. 20 minutes later, I saw that old Dodge pull up. I was never so happy to see my dad in my life. Normally, I had to pick that stubborn blue tick up to get him in the truck bed, but not that night. He leaped up on the tailgate and dove into his safe, warm dog box. I walked around the truck and I opened the door, but before I got in, I took one last look towards the creek. They were standing there, watching me in the glow of the taillight. And I waved to them, and I jumped in the cab. My father took one look at me and asked, "What happened to you?" "I must have had a little accident," I said with a smile. He handed me an old jacket and told me to sit on it, adding that he didn't want that pee smell all over his truck. I'm crying right now as I'm writing this. It's so hard to tell anyone, and that's why I'm telling everyone. Until now, I have never told a soul, not my dad that night, nor my best friend, or even my wife. I remember what I thought of my cousin's story, and I didn't want others to think the same about me. I've kept it bottled up for all these years, and now at least it's out. I didn't make good on my promise to God either, but I'm sure He forgives me. That was the only hardcore visual I've ever had of these creatures, or people. I know they're people. They have a soul just like we do. They know God just like I do. No, probably better than I do. I think they have a relationship with God that we can't even comprehend. A few years later, when I was 19, my mom and dad told me a story about a big skinny bear they saw on a cemetery road near Cabolingo State Forest. Mom said it didn't look like a bear. She said it looked like a Bigfoot. Dad quickly interrupted and said it was a bear, a skinny bear that crawled low to the ground on its belly, trying to hide. I didn't act like I thought it was a Sasquatch, but I knew it was. Later, Mom told me she thought it looked more like a Bigfoot than a bear. I had one more encounter when I was 27 years old. I was camping with an old girlfriend and her kids at East Lynn Lake. It was a weekend after school had started back in the fall, so there weren't any other campers. We picked the last campsite at the end of the campground. Her kids fell asleep in the pop-up camper around 11 p.m. My girlfriend and I were sitting at the fire when acorns and small pine cones started landing in the fire. And then they started hitting us. I got a flashlight and scanned the area looking for pranksters, but I didn't see a thing. No one was around anywhere. The hills on the side of us were steep, really steep, and we were at the last campsite. The acorns and pine cones were coming from those hills. We got scared and we went inside, but then they started hitting the camper. I heard chatter coming from up the hill behind us. It all sounded so familiar. The memory of that night raccoon hunting came flooding back to me. I knew who it was then, and I told my girlfriend it was raccoons, and she believed me. I started praying, and it stopped, like turning off a switch. It was pretty cool, but scary. And that's the end of his story. Oh, wow. I know I say this after every story, like, oh, wow, what a great story. But all of these are so good, they just shock me. I mean, as I read through them, they shock me. And I think about how in the world do these people cope with these kind of things and deal with this the rest of their life. I mean, you know, if it was a bear, bears are scary, even black bears. I mean, if I ran up on a black bear in the woods, I would be a little shook up because, you know, 99 times out of 100, they're just going to avoid humans. At least that's what I read. I've never run into one. But I mean, running into an animal that's almost human-like, covered in hair, and it doesn't act like an animal. It acts like it thinks things through. It acts like we do. I mean, they flank us, they follow us, they look at us, they make hand gestures at us, they throw things at us. They sometimes help people, and sometimes they get after people, and I don't know why, but I just don't know what it would be like seeing something like that, especially as a kid in the woods at night when you're hunting raccoons. I don't really know what to say about it all, but it's you know, I started this channel just to tell stories, and these stories really, really make me think. They make me think about the shock these people go through the longer I go on with this. And so I'm getting a little deeper into it 2.5 years later, and it's just crazy. And what have I said in this whole commentary? Absolutely nothing. But it's just some thoughts on my mind I thought I'd share them with you. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. Thanks to the writer, Stephen, for sending it. You did a great job writing it. Thanks, Neoma, for editing this and getting it in great shape. And we will see you guys on the next podcast. Thank you.